Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in to From a Place of Self with me, Dayal. I'm so grateful that you're here to tune in to your favorite IFS podcast. This is a space for us to explore the world of internal family systems and a space for us to be able to go deep into our own inner lives and explore some space for us to heal and transform. I deeply believe that the greatest service we can do for anybody is our own inner work. Somebody just this morning, I was speaking with them, their mother, and their children are grown, and she said that it's very common for people in general, but mothers specifically, to give so much to their children in a way that leaves them feeling empty and feeling as if they are deficient in some ways. And it's this very difficult balance of how much do I give and how much do I allow space for myself. And she just had this very simple line that was very powerful. She said, I just am a true believer of happy mommy, happy baby. And that was really sweet. I felt like happy mommy, happy baby, that children, as much as we want to do everything for them, also need to see their parents happy. They need to know what it means for somebody to model self-care, what it models, what it means for them to be fulfilled and take care of themselves. And we may love our kids, we may love our partners, we may love our parents, we may love our colleagues, we may love our society, we may love anyone around us, but the greatest gift we can actually give other people is our own fulfilled heart, our own sense of stability and working on ourselves in a way so that when we show up to care for other people, we're doing it from a filled place of self, that we're doing it from a place that's connected, that's centered, that is not depleted, right? And so that aspect of being able to work on ourselves is so extraordinarily foundational to anything that we want to do in the world. And therefore we call this podcast From a Place of Self, because we need to be leading and living our life from that place in order to make any lasting impact. And the tragedies and atrocities that we see and experience in the world are when powerful people are living from anywhere but there. And so this is our space to be able to do our own little service for the world by connecting more deeply and authentically with ourselves, so that then we can be guided. We can be well placed by a higher power, by spirit, in order to make our contributions into the world. And internal family systems, one of the basic principles is the idea that we have a multiplicity of parts in our psyche. And I wanted to just spend a little bit of time, especially for those that maybe have heard of parts work but are a little unfamiliar about the different types of parts that exist. Specifically, there's a section in this book that we've been reading, You Are the One You've Been Waiting For, where Richard Schwartz talks about how he developed the idea of parts itself and why he calls them parts. He often describes a phrase that he heard from his father, who was a scientist, and said, follow the data. Just follow the data wherever it leads you, even if it is in uncomfortable places. And so Richard Schwartz himself never necessarily came from this highly spiritual background or came from a space of believing, wanting, having an idea and then wanting to convince other people of it. It was through continuous working with clients, some of whom experienced tremendous trauma, some who had major addictive tendencies, and wanted to be able to understand their inner worlds. And so they would speak in this language, and he reads from this book. I call these often quarreling subpersonalities parts, because when I first started doing this kind of work, that is how my clients refer to them. Quote, part of me wants to stay married and faithful, but another part wants to be free to get laid every night of the week with a different woman, end quote, a client might say. Another would report, quote, I know I'm successful in my job, but there's a part of me that says it's only a matter of time until my wife finds out how stupid and incompetent I really am, end quote. The critical voice that harangued, I think I'm reading that right, Harangued, that harangued Debbie Ford, he quoted this lady, Debbie Ford, earlier in the book, with so much self-loathing, is an example of one kind of type of part called a protector, which tried to keep her from taking risks by running down her confidence. Isn't that such an interesting concept? that sometimes our inner critic, we think how to quiet my inner critic. Don't listen to your inner critic. Get rid of your inner critic. Your inner critic is the enemy. Your inner critic is ruining your life, right? But when we understand, if you actually understand the stories behind each of your parts and the reasons for why they function the way they do, you'll never meet a part that you don't love. Because that part isn't inherently critical. That part at a certain time in your life developed a role that it felt it needed to criticize you because it was afraid of you being seen, because if you were seen, you would get hurt. And so how can I shame and criticize you in such a way that keeps you small in order to protect you? Isn't that interesting? The self-loathing part within her tried to keep her from taking risks by running down her confidence. The more vulnerable inner childlike part that believed her critic and as a consequence felt worthless and empty is an example of a type of part I call an exile. So it's very often when you go into the inner space and you meet these protective parts, they know they're ineffective at times, but they don't believe there's another way. So there are exiles parts of us that carry our wounds and our shame and our guilt and our fear and our burdens. And then other parts step in to protect those parts, and they're known as protectors. And those protectors sometimes very often save our lives. They get us through very difficult periods. But oftentimes in the grand scheme, they have dire consequences because they end up increasing the shame. They end up preventing us from living life in a fulfilled way because they're parentified children themselves. They're parentified children themselves, and they require a leader known as self, right? And so he goes on and shares that when I first started doing this kind of work, I was amazed to find that if I could establish a safe, accepting atmosphere in our sessions, clients could have inner discussions with their parts. In a powerful state of internal focus, they could dialogue with their parts about what motivated them to react in such irrational or self-defeating ways. I'm going to read that again because I think it's really important. In a powerful state of internal focus, so this is the idea of going inside, right? Being able to listen internally. We can dialogue with our different parts about what motivates them, those parts, to react in such irrational or self-defeating ways. They're not trying to destroy you. They're not trying to bring you down. They're actually trying to protect you in the only way that they know how. As they listen to their part stories, what at first seemed irrational suddenly began to make sense as many parts let the clients know that they were stuck at points in the past when the behaviors or beliefs were understandable and even necessary. When it was necessary to not be seen, because being seen did get you hurt. When it was necessary to not take risks, because taking risks did get you hurt. And so part of the healing journey is being able to rescue these parts and bring them out of the past and be what Richard Schwartz calls our own healer. He goes on and says, you can become your own healer, the special person your vulnerable parts have been waiting for. And when that happens, your partner will be released from the Redeemer trap and its accompanying projects, and true intimacy will be possible. Because we can become the one that we've been waiting for. We can learn to go inside and tend to those vulnerable parts within us. And we can notice that even the protective parts of us, our inner critic, my addictive habits, my quote-unquote laziness, dissociative tendencies, the reactive parts of me, what are you protecting? What are you guarding against? One of the questions we ask very often in our sessions is, ask that part, what are you afraid would happen if you stopped doing what you were doing? If that part stopped doing its job, they're generally afraid of another part of you getting extraordinarily hurt or re-wounded, or that part overwhelming your system in a way that you won't be able to handle it. And so, therefore, even those parts that seem to be destructive externally are well-intentioned parts that are trying to prevent further wounding or destruction within ourselves internally. And so we learn to befriend those parts. And if I'm having an intense emotional reaction to a particular part, that just means there's another part that's coming in. Anything outside the realm of curiosity and compassion means that there's another part that's coming in and just needs loving attention from self. And so creating space for curiosity and compassion to my inner world is the launching point for inner healing. And we start to befriend those parts, understand their fears, go to the wounded parts within us, unburden them, let them release those shame and guilt and extreme roles that they're playing, and restore them to their essence, their natural state of being. And in that space, we can live a fulfilled life. And that requires connection to self, which is the next part of the book that we want to share with you here, but we're going to save that for the next episode when we're going to talk about what it means to have a core sense of self. What are the qualities of that self? And how are we able to bring our parts into a loving relationship with that sense of self? But again, it just starts with a self-awareness and a willingness to befriend those parts of me that I thought needed to be exiled, cut off, or destroyed. Because there are no bad parts. There are only parts that need loving attention from self. So I hope you give yourself a little bit of that today. Thank you so much for tuning in, for being with me. As always, feel free to reach out anytime. My email is dayal, D-A-Y-A-L, @consciousearthinstitute.com. You can check out my IFS website, which I run with my wife, Rasika, consciousearthinstitute.com. We'd love to be in touch, share further work with you. If you'd like to work with us, ask questions, or take this journey further, or need any other kind of support, please be in touch. Please share something that you found meaningful with a friend, and in this way, we can be beacons of light for other people around us. So thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.